I'm Joshua Adams, and this is the Industry Insights Podcast, where I am joined in the Rock Paper Simple studio by community leaders as we dive into industry topics and perspectives. Thanks for joining us today. I have Alex Rudloff, co-founder of GMTM. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I'm excited about having you. We're going to talk about AI today, which is a fun topic. We've heard a lot of different angles, but I'm excited to hear about your experience with it and kind of how you're using it and what you see the future. But before we dive into it, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about your background. I know you spent some time at AOL, TEDx, before moving on to this current project. So tell us a little bit about that.
Been around for a minute now. I was kind of a hardcore computer kid in the 80s and 90s. I started young, had an internet service provider here in the area. Then after college, started a company that got acquired by AOL. I was a vice president of product there when I left. And then after that was recruited by TED Conference in New York, where I became chief digital strategist of TEDx and helped them build out the global community, which was a ton of fun. And now I'm working on a social network for athletes. Called GMTM, which is the way to remember it is game time without the vowels.
Got it. That's the only way I was able to remember it.
I
had to go through it a couple times.
It's a weird name, but it's short and easy to remember.
Love it. Well, that's a lot of fun. I think it gives you a lot of perspective on what you do today. But let's talk a little bit about AI. Obviously, it's this evolving thing. We've all heard of ChatGPT, and a lot of us have dabbled with it. We're using some of those tools here at Rock Paper Simple, but tell me a little bit about how you're using it, what you're seeing evolve with it. I know it has a lot to do with what you guys are doing day to day. So tell us a bit about how you guys are using AI.
Yeah, no, I think OpenAI's ChatGPT has probably been one of the most remarkable products I've seen in a really long time. It's something I actually pay for and get a ton of value out of. I think there's some misconceptions and there's some sort of misplaced fear maybe around some of it. And then of course, as a chief technology officer building out a product in the AI space, we do an enormous amount with OpenAI's API as well as other APIs that are available. So we've had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, no, I believe that. Now you're doing some pretty unique things with it. So I do want to talk about where you see it going, kind of the vision you see. But I do want to talk a little bit about how you guys are using it.
There's sort of two aspects to it. From a product perspective at our company, we're using AI to help athletes pursue various goals. So that comes in different ways. The obvious one, and probably the most popular one, is a chatbot that you can engage with. It's been trained on 30,000 different NCAA coaches' contact information. It has our giant database that we've built out working with Team USA, who's one of our partners, on how to pursue different sports and different fitness routines. You can give it a goal. I want to throw the ball farther, and it'll come up with a calisthenic workout for you to help achieve that goal, and then tracks it and measures it and all that kind of fun stuff. So that's sort of the user facing AI. But then behind the scenes, we're using AI in terms of the recommended videos that we're going to show you or the activities we think you ought to pursue. All sorts of fun ways. We have a new thing coming out soon where it actually generates challenges for you to do to help showcase specific skills related to your goals. All sorts of fun stuff like that outside of just normal chat that people have started to associate with AI.
I love that.
And then, from a daily perspective, I use it as a data scientist. I use it as an intern. I use it as, all these wonderful things, a copy editor sometimes, all that fun stuff.
So obviously, again, a lot of usage for it. You have I'd love to hear your perspective on AI, on ChatGPT, how it's being used, where it's going.
Yeah, I think the first misconception people have is people hear AI and they see ChatGPT and they assume that the language part of it, the chat part of it, is the intelligence. The way I would explain it better is that it's just part of the brain. We're still building out the rest of the brain. So it's like, think of ChatGPT as the language component of the brain. Now, that's not perfect. There's some emerging characteristics of LLMs that are hard to explain that people are trying to figure out. But when you pay for ChatGPT and you have access to the data analysis or the imaging or some of the other advanced functions, ChatGPT, the LLM, is basically acting as the interface to those things.
Gotcha. When you
So
say that you're using an acronym there,
yeah,
for the rest of us that don't have the
yeah, sorry,
IQ here, you
definitely
need
definitely
help.
bring me down. Large language model. So basically, the way ChatGPT works is by predicting the next word. So you're going to give it a prompt as a user, and it's going to respond with the statistically most likely word, and then the next statistically most likely word, so on and so forth. So think of it as far as intelligence, it's almost like talking with someone who's well read versus talking with an author. Those are different levels of expertise. Somebody who's well read can regurgitate a lot of things and might be really interesting and might know a lot, but it's still not the primary source of information, right? That's what the LLM does very, very well. Where it becomes magic is when you connect it to those primary sources of information, and it can speak with authority. So there's a story about a lawyer using ChatGPT, and he got in a lot of trouble for it because it like made up case law. When it's when it's not connected to a data store or a part of the brain that knows case law, it's gonna tell you something because it's gonna say the next most probable word. It's always gonna have an answer for the most part. That doesn't mean it's correct. So people call these hallucinations, where it'll just make up sort of facts, and that's a sign that there's nothing behind that LLM that's an authority on what you're asking it for. So like in sports, we have a database that's just recruiting knowledge and just college coaching and just fitness knowledge. And we use the LLM to interface with the user to connect them with that data sort of in the background. So it takes on a much different feel and is a much, much higher authority than what you would get just by going to, ChatGPT.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So we've talked a bit about you're kind of a power user of AI. You use it every day, multiple times a day. I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective on how people, professionals, business owners can use it day to day in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I think there's the obvious use case, things like copy editing, for instance. Not everybody is the best author in the world or the best writer in the world. I think ChatGPT is really good for that, helping to organize thoughts. If you pay for it and you're accepted into the beta program, they have something called advanced data analysis right now. So you can give it a CSV file and it'll create charts and graphs and tell you correlations or scatter plots or whatever it is that you're looking to do. That is a huge part of what I use it for. Every morning I go through and I feed it a bunch of data and I get a bunch of answers that would normally take me, maybe a few hours, and now it takes me 10 minutes, 15 minutes or that sort of thing. I've seen people use it in their personal lives for recipes. I have a friend who's only cooking what ChatGPT tells him to cook, and he gives it his ingredients every day, and it fires back something unique for him to make, which is kind of fun. Those are probably the blocking and tackling things that you can do right now, right?
Right. So where do you see it going, though? Right. So obviously you're on the front lines. You're using it every day. It's a big part of the business that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
You're using it in the apps you're building and the tools you're using, front end, back end, the whole deal. So where do you see it evolving to? Where do you see it going?
Yeah, I think as people build systems that connect to authoritative databases, right? As people build out these new technologies that leverage the APIs that OpenAI and Claude and all the others are starting to come out with. That's where we'll really see productivity in very specific industries start to take off. The best way to think of ChatGPT now is like having an army of interns, and with an intern, doing work, it's very helpful. It saves you a lot of time. It's good delegation. You still have to check the work, right? And you still don't want to hand off the expertise to the intern. That alone is hugely powerful. I mean, if everybody had unlimited interns for $20 a month, you see a productivity increase across every single industry at once, right? That's part of what makes it so exciting. But when they can take it a step further from that, you start seeing entrepreneurs putting together companies that go deep in one specific category. And no longer is it, an intern that I have to go through and verify the math, but it's something that I can trust and something with a little bit more authority. I think we see productivity gains go through the roof.
That makes sense. I think right now you can describe that as, it's attached to, from a data perspective, a very broad data set.
Right.
So
correct.
It's not it doesn't specialize in anything. It just knows a lot of stuff. right? Like you said,
Mhm.
well read. I really like that
Yeah.
explanation earlier. It's like well read. It's not an author. It's very well read, very broadly read. So it knows a little bit about everything, and it might get its facts mixed up.
Every now and then it's going to say something crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
But this idea of, hey, eventually building specific databases, specific training, if you will, where it's pulling from more specific data, that's where it starts to become really powerful for certain use cases.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the research is taking place right now. You have, retrieval augmented generation, which is like a geeky way of saying it connects to a database. The challenge is when a user asks something, you have to be able to classify what it's asking. Okay, are they looking for a recommendation? Are they looking for a fact? Are they looking for a task to be performed? You classify that query, and then you have to route it to the appropriate place in a way. And people are still figuring out how to do that in the most effective and fast ways. But as that continues to progress, which is happening, frankly, pretty quickly, I think we'll start to see, things that come across very, very intelligent at very specific tasks.
And frankly, stuff that you'll be able to rely on a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right. If you know
Yeah,
that data is pulling from something, right now, the highly encouraged, double check the work, double check what it's giving you.
An example, I was measuring in marketing, you have something called K factor, which is the virility of a product. Its calculations were wrong the other day, and I could tell by the graph it was producing. I'm like, this number does not lead to that. Like, I know that's not right. So I asked to see the work, and I go through and I validate it. I find where the error was. I explained what its error was and how to do the math properly, and then it worked fine, right? But that took time. So when all of that kind of stuff is worked out, and you're not having to second guess, and you can trust that it knows what it's doing, you're just saving more and more time, right? And that throws the productivity through the roof.
So as a creative agency, we use AI in a lot of different ways, right? And
Sure.
so we've seen it used in the copy space. You see it used Photoshop. We're seeing it used at the programming. I've had a developer call me over here to his desk the other day and say, check this out, right? And he was trying to get a certain thing to work. And if you're familiar with web design, we use a lot of WordPress and use WordPress plugins. And there was a specific thing he was trying to get to work, and he couldn't get it. So he went to ChatGPT and said, write me a WordPress plugin that does this, 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 and this other thing, right? And it wrote it, and it was wrong, did not work. So he popped it open, looked, so found the error. He put it back. This doesn't work. Here's where I think your error is. Spits back out. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the code again. It wrote it in the wrong language. So instead of PHP, it wrote it in like JavaScript or something. And so he goes, no, this is JavaScript. Please write this in PHP, right? It apologized again, rewrote it again. The darn thing worked, and it worked really well.
Yeah.
And it was really wild. And so we're starting to see more usages like that, right? And so what are you seeing in terms of everyday application helping people do their jobs better?
Sure. Well, I think in technology, you kind of nailed it, right? You guys, obviously, you've seen what Photoshop is doing with their generative fills, where it'll take a photo and change the landscape or add a certain element to it or whatever, and it's photorealistic. From a programming point of view, being able to get code samples, Copilot, which is sort of a fine-tuned model of GPT-4, I think, or either 3.5 or 4, but it's built into VS Code, and it's like if programmers were given a calculator for programming in a way.
That makes sense.
Where it auto completes things, or you can write, a comment of, I need a function to do this, and it fills out the rest of it. And I would say it is usually either right or close to it, and then you kind of adjust. It's been hugely transformative about that. It takes junior programmers up to probably a mid programmer. It helps everybody kind of level up just a little bit, I think, in terms of sort of the run-of-the-mill tasks. It's not yet doing architecture well, but I think that'll probably come in time. I think the big unlock for me is similar to the employee that you mentioned. I've been using GPT since like 2.5 or something, and every version of it, you try it out, and you're like, okay, this is getting close. When GPT-4 came out, I set aside time to actually pair program with it all day. I'm like, I'm going to work with this thing all day long. And I started at 6 a.m. or whatever it was. I usually start, and I think I made it till, probably closer to 3 p.m. before I actually had to write a line of code. And it was really pushing, and I was intentional. I was really pushing it. Um, but asking it things, and then when the compiler would have an error, I would feed that error back in and it would correct itself. And it was kind of slow and cumbersome, but I think if any engineer is being honest, that's essentially what we do all day. We just do it faster. It got to a point where it couldn't get past a problem, and it was one of those things where I could solve it in 30 seconds. So I just kind of did it and left it behind. That's a glimpse, I think, of what's coming in other industries. Practically speaking, right now, for most small business owners, things like copy editing, coming up with marketing ideas and high level plans, bookkeeping. If you're fortunate enough to be in the beta program of ChatGPT and you have advanced data analysis, that's game changing. When you can export a CSV file, which everybody has access to from Excel, and basically have a conversation with a spreadsheet and ask all sorts of questions. That's pretty incredible. And when it doesn't get it right, you can, I'll ask it for functions in Google Spreadsheet or Excel, and it'll tell me how to go about building the spreadsheet that I want to build. There was an example. I was trying to, I was investigating cohorts and different user behavior, and neither Excel nor Google had a function of what I needed. And ChatGPT instructed me to create a custom function on Google Spreadsheets that could do what I wanted, and it worked perfectly. And it was like one of these unlocks where now I know how to do that, whereas I'd never built a custom function on Google Spreadsheets before. So it wasn't just an unlock there. There was a teaching a man to fish sort of moment where all of a sudden I just became better at my job because it showed me something I didn't know was possible. I think a lot of business owners would probably have that experience just by working with it and starting to get in the habit of thinking almost AI first.
No, I agree. I've used it in a lot of different ways in terms of optimizing content, presentations. I've had presentations where I had my notes and I got stuck, had a little bit of writer's block. Okay, how do I want to present this? I wrote a presentation that was too long, and I was like, I only have 20 minutes. So I actually copy and pasted my presentation in and said, rewrite this to be presented in 20 minutes. And not only did it do that, but it broke it down and told me how long to spend on each section.
Right. Things like that are hugely instructive and hugely helpful. And it's not doing your job. It's in a way, it's a vitamin, not a, painkiller like that, but it's a heck of a vitamin. I mean, it can really increase your productivity and your output.
Yeah. And even then I was, I looked at it and I said, okay, I like this. I actually, I was polite, good job, start with some compliments, right?
Well, just in case,
in case it ever takes over, it'll remember I was nice to it.
Correct.
And so that day on the battlefield, when it walks past me and doesn't shoot me, I'll know that
you'll be last in line, not first.
That's right. But I said, okay, you spent too long on this time. I'd like to spend more time on this topic, and it rearranged it. Right. I felt like this was too direct. Please, right, and changes the tone. Please make this first person versus third person. Right. So those little tweaks, it'll rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've used it where I've given it talking points or a speech or something that I was working on, and said, well, I don't really like this part, or the intro is a little weak, or things like that, and use it for ideation. So it's less about, copying and pasting, but getting past that writer's block, I think, is enormously beneficial on its own.
Yeah. I was sharing a devotional, and I was stuck on some verses that supported it. And I said, this is what I'm trying to say. Give me some other passages that go with this. And it did, right? And I was like, great, perfect. That's exactly what I needed. And I was able to run with the rest of it. So it's just little things like that. And sometimes, like you said earlier, sometimes it's like having that intern or that assistant, somebody who can help you through it. And it's not going to do your whole job for you, right? But it's going to make what you're doing maybe a little bit easier, or do a little bit of that digging or research.
Think about how much time is wasted on something like writer's block, right? Something as simple as writer's block you might have to wait around 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe a day, to have the right idea or to get the words exactly right, where, an AI assistant could say, well, here's 10 variations of it, and now you're moving on.
Right.
That's where the time savings are.
We see a lot in ideation. I know I have team members that'll use it for ideation when we're doing branding, when we're working through phrases, slogans, things like that. It's great for the ideation. You get something to work with. Great. We like that as a basis. Now let's iterate on it. Let's make it better. And I've seen a lot of that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So we joked about the AI coming for us.
Right.
But really, let's kind of ground ourselves in reality here. And Tell me what you see in terms of how this affects society, how this affects, frankly, the human race in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, first, I would say it doesn't help to be careful, right? I will say please and thank you as well. But I think we have a natural tendency to jump all the way to Terminator. You know, that's what we've been conditioned to think about, and that's sort of what all the stories are. The reality is, I think it's more like Rosie from the Jetsons. Um, you know, our whole lives we've heard, oh, the robots are coming, and you're going to have all these assistants and all this kind of stuff. I would say that they're arriving, but they're not physical. The robots are software, right? And if you understand that uh, sort of separation, and if you understand how to start integrating it in your life, um, the biggest societal impact isn't, you know, Skynet. The societal impact is that productivity gets way faster. Um, we're already in a world where, you know, everything's going exponential, and we have all these different tech curves taking off at once, and it can feel like, oh man, everything's changing so fast. Um, I don't know if we've really seen what that looks like yet. You know, in geek culture and sort of my world, there's, you know, oh, is this the singularity, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Well, one of the definitions of singularity, Ray Kurzweil's definition of it, is when technology is creating technology and it's moving so fast that you can't keep up. It's not really about consciousness. We can debate consciousness and, you know, what that looks like. But we are on the verge of having systems that create more systems, and that's fascinating and intriguing, and will cause maybe a little bit of chaos, but will also unlock, you know, all sorts of advances in pretty much every category that you can think about. One, you know, if this is a fun thought exercise, but early in software, you would have like a base program, right? It'd be on a floppy and whatever. But software makers is such a small industry; they would tailor it to your business. So you'd buy a spreadsheet, but it'd have, you know, XYZ tweaks to it. You know, if AI is writing software, we could easily get back to that. There's this idea of malleable software where you report a bug in your software and it fixes it in real time. Or this is great, but I really wish it had this function, like my spreadsheet example, and it just has that function, right? When software can write software, that's where I think we'll see some pretty crazy things take over. I mean, you can think about medical research, you can think about transportation, you can think about, you know, all these breakthroughs. When you're able to use it for that, as opposed to help me write this blog post, that's where things will take off. It's almost a democratization of knowledge work, right? So, and I'm getting all hoity-toity on this, but like if you think about you know, the Industrial Revolution being about automating physical work, a lot of this is about automating knowledge work, right? It's sort of the next phase of this greater trend that's been going on for the last, you know, 100, 200 years. Overall, I don't think it's going to be Terminator. I think it'll have a profound effect in ways that we can't necessarily predict. But ultimately, we're going to stand on the shoulders of it. We're going to partner with it, and that should be really, really exciting.
I think to your point, we look at this as we're always afraid of the next technology, right? You look
Right.
at what the response was to photography, even, right, and how the art community was in outrage. This is going to ruin, you ruin it, and it's going to make artists lazy, and all of these things. But it became its own art form,
Yeah,
right?
became its own
Photography
genre.
is its
Sure.
own career path,
Mhm.
right? And it has evolved. And I think if you look at that, every technology, there's this fear of it's going to take away jobs, right? It's going to ruin an industry. But it is always evolving, and it builds new jobs, and it
Yeah,
builds
it
new
builds
support,
new industries.
new
I
industries
mean,
around that. And
correct.
so I think looking at that and standing on the shoulders of it and looking and saying, hey, okay, what is this going to create next? It creates a lot of opportunity, right?
Mhm.
It's a lot of what you guys are doing
Mhm.
over at GMTM in terms of leveraging that and saying,
Mhm.
what's the next opportunity? It's creating e-commerce, it's creating technology and jobs, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of opportunity around this. I think we only understand it a little bit so far.
Yeah.
And as we get our head around it and begin to understand where this is going, I think there's a pretty cool future here for us.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I mean, I mean, you've known me a while. I get excited about every new technology, but this is one where the immediate impact on my day-to-day life was pretty quick. I mean, like, you know, ChatGPT 4 came out in March. I mean, it's a heck of a growth curve when you look at what they're able to accomplish in the short amount of time that they've been working on it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing. I'm excited
Absolutely.
about seeing the next step in what AI looks like for all of us. And thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Industry Insights. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe, comment, or even drop us a line over at rockpapersimple.com.